Okay. Going from space to cyberspace. This is our next session. Space, as we all know, is a friendly environment concerning human hostilities and things like this. Still, many people are afraid that space will be used for not so friendly actions, and especially people should care about the vulnerability of space assets to actions initiated by bad guys, and as anyone living in Israel knows that there are always bad guys somewhere. And therefore, we would like to devote the next 30 minutes to discussing what are the challenges, what should be done, what is the situation today, what cannot be done in cybersecurity of space assets. And for this, we have three very talented speakers. I will describe them now, and everyone I'll describe, please come and take a seat. The first one is Captain Navy, I should say, Colonel, retired Moshe Golani, who is today the Senior Vice President for Engineering of Spacecom. Moshe? And he used to be the head of the C4I division of MAFAD. This is the R&D Directorate of the Ministry of Defense, which part of his mission was to take care of cybersecurity technology. He is an electrical engineer, having both BSc and Masters from the Technion. The next one is Ram Levy, who is the founder and the CEO of Confidas. It's a cybersecurity company. Ram was also, he has a master's in security studies from Tel-Aviv University, and he was the secretary of the committee, the task force that I led in 2011, which prepared the national multi-year plan of the government building the cyber ecosystem that we are proud of here in Israel. And the third one is Niv David. Please come. Niv is a fellow and a lecturer with our Blavotnick Cyber Research Center of Tel Aviv University, which I had. And also he is, today is the head of aviation and cyberspace programs in IAI, ELTA IAI. Okay, I'll take a seat too. We have microphones there. Thank you. No. Because we are something like 45 minutes behind time, I would like to a little bit to shorten this panel, and therefore you should try to be clear and very short. First question, and everyone who wants to answer, please raise your hand. First question is about the threats and challenges. What are really the threats and what are the challenges in cybersecurity of space assets? Moshe, should you?
I think it's very important to emphasize while speaking about cyber defense for satellites that we distinguish cyber defense from information assurance. It's not only information assurance, it's much more than that. It's more securing the functionality of the satellite, and this goal is much more difficult to achieve. The threat is of course huge due to the fact that the satellite is exposed and could be reached from almost anywhere in the Earth and could be attacked almost from anywhere. Yesterday, one of the interesting speakers here on this stage, General Skinner from the US Air Force said that the US Air Force estimates that the probability of attacking a network from a satellite asset is higher than the probability of attacking it from a ground asset. And when we speak about the threat, I think there are two families of threats. Threats that will come when we start to propagate from the ground, from the IT networks. This is really much more easy to mitigate with some IT cyber off-the-shelf tools. And the other scenario is attacking from the space asset. This is much more unique, much more difficult to mitigate, and I believe these kind of threats will be a 0 days threats, and this require a unique approach to secure the satellite from these kind of threats. Just to give an example, I believe this kind of threat will be what we call a triggered scenario. A malware could be injected to the satellite while in construction during 2 or 3 years. Many opportunities can cause the attacker to inject the malware while on the ground, and this malware will be silent during the acceptance test. Everything will pass quietly, relatively as planned. And then while the satellite is passing a period in time or in location, it will wake up and can cause really a significant effect to the functionality of the satellite.
Anyone else wants to add it?
When we look at protecting space-based assets, I think we should differentiate the problem into 3. First of all, the satellite itself, which you discussed. Then the ground segment, which is almost impossible to defend because it's high dependability on cyber networks. But not less important are the users who are using the space-based service. And in that regard, we should differentiate between 2 types of, I think, very vulnerable space-based services. First of all, are telecommunication services, because they are pretty much static. And the second, which we see many more attacks, are attacks that are aimed towards position navigation and timing satellites, which are attacking the GPS downlinks of the GPS satellites. And for that, we see an increasing threats. Why? Because many systems are dependent on that, not only for where they are, but for the times and the ability to synchronize the time between, for example, antennas, the time for bank transactions, and that is a major threat that we still don't know how to solve.
Okay, can you tell us, you remember when you were a student, you did this project of attacking, you remember?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit?
Yes. In this project, what we've tried to show is that it's quite easy to attack a ground station by understanding the logic of the ground station. And what we did is this. We penetrated the ground station that is broadcasting television to the satellites. And the way it works is this. Every satellite feed, or majority of satellite feeds, have 2 satellite feeds. One is the one we see, and the other one is the one that is the secondary one, it's the backup. And according to the logic of the ground station, if there is some type of an error in the primary feed, then the secondary goes up automatically. So what we have done is we've attacked the secondary feed because nobody is really watching the backup one. And we've disrupted the primary one, so the logic of the system moved us automatically to the secondary one. And to make sure that the administrator cannot take control back of the system, we changed the administrative password. So basically they had to reset the entire ground station and therefore negate the entire space services from the ground station. It took us about 3 hours to do that.
What was amazing, it was 2 students with the help of 1 expert, and in less than 3 hours, they achieved the goal. You want to add to the challenges of threats?
I'd like to add the project that Ram just spoke about. So I took a bit of a part there before my current job. The amazing part of it, as Ram mentioned, is that it had nothing to do with the satellite. It was only the ground station. And one of the challenges that we found, this wasn't the attack vector, but there were so many attack vectors there that it wasn't almost a real challenge. You can see like administrator computers connected to the internet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So no big deal here, though it was a really neat project. I'd just like to add to the original question that these threats that Ram and Moshe mentioned are now even greater than ever because satellites were or still are considered like a sterile environment because you cannot reach them in space, more or less. And this thinking is quite misleading because you have an uplink and the uplink comes from the ground and you can attack the ground. And the second thing is that even those sterile satellites are now more and more, and we saw that during those 2 days, are based on commercial off-the-shelf COTS, hardware, software, etc., which we know is vulnerable, which we know is, has its limits, cyber defense and protection.
Thank you. We had this afternoon, or even before noon, we had this very interesting session on new space. Space is becoming more and more small companies, commercial small companies are being involved in space, and less big, huge mega companies like we used to have a few years ago. And this should have some implication also for cybersecurity of space assets. Can you talk about it?
I think in general it will enhance the problem due to the fact that in new space you build satellites, you build them fast, you build them cheap, so you need to, you have to use COTS equipment. In COTS equipment, the supply chain allows you to inject malwares much more easily than in unique governmental projects and so on. On the other hand, those new space constellations are going to be distributed, so there's no single point of failure. But if we add the fact that we're going to use extremely high capacity inter-satellite links, therefore it will be similar to ground networks, and only one injection point, one intrusion point, can get us to everywhere we want in the network. So at the end of the day, I think it will enhance the problem.
The number one reason for hacking today is money. Although we hear more about...
You speak about individuals.
Yes.
But not by states.
No, not by states. But if I'm looking at the total number of attacks, most attacks are motivated by money. People want to make money, easy money, so they steal information to sell it, they steal money to sell it, they steal credit cards to sell it, or they steal the money itself. So most attacks are motivated by money. But when we look at attacks against space, they're not really motivated by money. This goes to your question, if more commercial space assets will be launched, and the command of those space assets will be done by commercial actors who will have less budget and resources and knowledge on how to secure them, unlike military or companies that know how to pretty much know how to secure themselves today, the motivation to attack space-based assets for the purpose of money will increase. Because this way you can create a very high collateral damage with very low risk of being found by someone because of the lack of attribution. And that will lead to people maybe hijacking even satellites and requesting money, which doesn't really happen today. So that's one possible scenario which I'm really worried about. And so to summarize all this up together, if command of satellites will be done by commercial actors, those who are motivated to attack for budget, for money reasons, will be able to attack those satellites and create a very large damage. I
would like to differ here, okay? I agree that there is a huge amount of cyber attacks done by individuals or crime organizations with the criminal aim, and this is done for money, and as you said, it may also increase in case of cybersecurity, of space asset cybersecurity. Still, I think there is much more activity done by states. Take, for example, spying, or take, for example, the opportunity to hijack a satellite. Instead of investing in buying or developing a satellite, you can hijack a satellite for intelligence purposes, which will not be done by individuals. There is no motivation there. I agree with you, but we shouldn't forget the other threats as well. But
I agree, and we've seen that happen. And we've seen civilians ground stations like the one in Germany that was attacked by the GCHQ according to WikiLeaks. My argument is that nation states are restraining themselves when they're attacking space-based assets because they understand the collateral damage, which criminals might not understand or might not be willing to restrain themselves.
yes, but in case of war, something like this, it will be put aside.
I'd like to add to that I agree with Ram, but I think there is probably, not based on knowledge or facts, but on common sense, there's probably a huge amount or big amount of CNE attacks on satellites, not the CNA that Ram is referring to. So, you know, like Itzhak said, more espionage, spying, and things like that. I would just like to add that I see one great challenge in new space and one great opportunity. The one great challenge is that beside the things that we spoke earlier about the COTS and stuff like that, governmental satellites, despite what we like to think or not like to think about our governments, our militaries, our security organizations, they do something sometimes, something right sometimes. And it's not that everything is not protected, that everything is hackable, everything is purely left side. So they're doing something. The problem is what is happening or what will happen in the very near future with the commercial satellites, with the commercial space systems, where money is the main objective and you want to cut funds for everything that is not, you cannot see the return on investment, security as one of them. And here there is a challenge, and there was a lot of talk about regulation and where regulation comes in, or where can it help, where it's disruptive. Something will need to be done about that, because otherwise we'll see a lot of security problems with commercial space systems. However, there is also a great opportunity here, both from the cyber side and second from the business side, because now there's a chance to do it right. Plan right, implement security by design right, do the next generation and the next generation of the commercial space assets cyber protected.
Okay, that leads me to the next question. And what really are the solutions for these cyber threats? What already exists? What is not yet existing and we should develop it? What is the roadmap? I would like to hear your opinion.
I think when we speak about the space assets, we don't have much. We do have encryption for the telecommand today, and it's not only for government satellites. Commercial companies require that the telecommand and the telemetry will be encrypted, civilian encryption, but still difficult to break. We don't have a magic solution. I think we will have to deal with it from the system engineering level. It's not just a component and not just in the software level. We have to make the satellite with much more fast recovery capabilities, some hot standby backups, and these kind of things in order to also detect anomalies, use the anomaly detection methods. I think one of the challenges, and it's unique for satellites, the satellite industry is extremely conservative due to the fact that when it's go up, you cannot fix anything, and then there's zero tolerance for failure. And if we're talking about commercial companies, it also will have to be affordable. I don't want to say cheap, but it cannot increase the price of the satellite and when break the business case for this satellite, like government can invest in satellites. So it has to be affordable, it has to be in the system engineering level. It has to be autonomous and automatic, and to be foolproof, and to be tested, not to damage anyhow the functionality of the satellite.
I'm less worried about espionage, because I think that espionage reduces uncertainty, especially between nation states. I'm more worried about the health of the spacecraft and the collateral damage of the health of the spacecraft to other spacecraft, especially in low Earth orbit, and to critical services that satellites provide. Therefore, I will divide my answer into two. In terms of the health of the satellite and the spacecraft itself, I agree with Moshe that it is about system engineering and about maybe even declaring a price for what it will mean for those adversaries to hit those satellites, because the damaging those satellites will be an effect that will be irreversible. So therefore, deterrence must be in place. The second thing is protecting the service itself. When protecting the service itself, I think we should mainly follow what the banks are doing, because banks are doing a pretty good job. That means that you need information sharing between the actors. You need to be proactive. That means you need to collect intelligence and understand the capabilities of the adversaries. You need to do a better anomaly detection and much better ground station design and network segmentation, and most importantly, to be proactive all the time and adjust your defenses to the current threats that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
So I totally agree. I'd like to add, there are a few pillars of security that are always viable, no matter which system, no matter which domain. So on one hand, back to the basics of security, but the 2018 version. Okay, so it's not only about IT security anymore, though in the space business, even that is not fully implemented yet, so we have a way to go there. But on the other hand, I very much attribute to what Moshe said. It's in the system engineering. I even dare to call it make the hardware great again. So the security by design needs to be also on the hardware level, not only the software level. On the other hand, we must not neglect the more standard pillars like IT, like software, etc. I can say that in the recent year in Israel, we have made quite a bit of progress in cyber defense for space systems. I think it needs some extra attention, governmental, private sector, etc. But I think just like Israel is a leader in protecting smart and connected cars without having a car industry at all, so the same goes for the space industry. We do have a space industry, luckily. We know how to make satellites, though not cars. And now we are aiming at having cybersecurity for space systems as well, and having Israel's expertise on that being a world leader.
Okay, before we close this very short session, you want to add something?
I would like to add one thing. From what we see in other industries, the biggest driver for investing for companies to invest in security is regulation. You can tell them how dangerous things are, and you can scare them to death by how you can attack them and what damage you can create. They really spend the big money when there's regulation. So if we really want to see the space industry starting to invest, we need to find the right places to regulate the industry. Not to put too much burden, but to regulate. And I think we should look closely at what's happening now in Europe in two regards. One, the privacy regulation, which will come into force in May 2018. And the other one is the protection of national information of critical infrastructure in Europe, which will also drive the satellite industry in Europe to invest in more in securing their critical infrastructure and space-based systems.
I think that we're in a situation that we still haven't experienced the wake-up call for cyber defense for satellite.
Okay, this was only a first taste of cybersecurity for space assets. We have not touched many subjects like you said not espionage, but counter-espionage, for example. In case of war, I don't see any reason why I will let satellites operated by my enemies, okay, taking images of targets in Israel or any other country. We have not spoken about ransom, what we call ransomware. I mean, they are now blackmailing hospitals. There is no reason why even criminals, not only states, would not blackmail operators of space assets, etc. There are many other subjects that we have not touched, but I wanted only to give you a taste of it, and I hope we will take this issue seriously. Thank you.